Hello everyone, thank you so much for tuning into my video. Today I'll be talking about the documentary They Shot the Miners. Now I will say that what happened was very gruesome, so if you're not really okay with vivid descriptions of violence, I understand if you want to watch someone else's video. Basically, in the video that I watched, the miners work for the London Company. This is a company that uses African workers in South Africa, pays them barely $500 a month in order to mine out precious metals and then export them to either Britain or the US. And the company is owned in Britain. In this film, the company chooses to expand the surrounding areas that they cover, which leaves them economically vulnerable. However, at the same time, the miners choose to go on a strike. Usually, the miners actually do have a union to work through, the National Union for Miner Workers. However, the former founder of this union actually gets so much traction and so much support that he then becomes a high economic stakeholder and actually sits as a member on the board of the company London. So, what happens? The miners go on a 6-day march back and forth between mountains, which is basically land that isn't owned by the company, and the actual company office and headquarters in order to speak with the manager or management to negotiate their salaries, because you can't live off of $500 a month. The miners go by different names. Between each other, they call each other rock drillers. Typically, average rock driller is someone who is uneducated and they simply work in slave conditions. If I had to do a fair comparison, they were under the same conditions as criminal leasing. So they're being worked extra hard, they're working hard like they're slaves, and they're not really getting paid much at all. Not only that, it usually follows down the line in family. So if a father is a rock miner, so is his son. Now, this march took between 6 days. I would honestly say it was 5 because the last day of the march is when the massacre happened. And yes, there is a massacre. So originally, the company actually did choose to speak to them. But what happened was they brought out paperwork and files, and the workers were like, we are uneducated men. We cannot read. We cannot negotiate this way. It had to be word of mouth almost. So after this, that was basically the first day of the march. On the second day of the march, they got so many more workers to come. And it was just amazing. It was about 3,000 workers. And so they marched back to headquarters from the mountains where they were staying at in order to negotiate. And they refused negotiation. And at this point, the police were following them. But the police were only following them because the London Company actually sent them out there and asked for more backup. So as the police are following the protesters or the marchers and they're going back home, to the mountains where they reside, the police actually started shooting tear gas at them and some shots were fired, and we end up with 2 protesters dead, and that was the first death. Following the days preceding the actual massacre, which happened on August 16, 2012, we see that there's increasingly more violence as the National Union of Miner Workers actually worked alongside the London Company and the police, led by the police national commissioner, to harm the protesters. On the last day of the march, essentially what happens is that London decides they're not going to negotiate, and there's been email threads between the former union founder, the national police commissioner, and the London Company that the protests, under every circumstance, will end today. As the protesters are getting ready to go home because they realize there will be no negotiating whatsoever happening, and they refuse to work under those forms and strengths that kept them there, the system of capitalism, they try their best to go home. They start leaving the mountain, and that's when the cops box them in and open fire on them. Not only did 38 of the protesters died simply trying to flee and go home, like surrendering. 20 minutes after the massacre, they were hunted down. This was horrifying, and it's made even worse knowing that none of the police officers served any time, got any charges, nothing of such. But some of the leaders of the miners' march were actually arrested and charged for murder. This film was very eye-opening because it showed just how much power the system of capitalism gives to people. Now, personally, I do not believe that capitalism overall is horrible, but I do believe that if you're not in the position to negotiate with your employer, which is what the union was there for, then people are stuck in these horrifying situations where they have nothing else to do but work to support their family or die because of the lack of resources and the lack of control and say that they have and who they work for. I highly suggest people watch this, but again, it does actually show footage of the marchers being shot at and all the criminal acts that the police committed during the span of 6 days. I hope you all go watch it, and I hope you guys found this video very informative. Thank you so much. Bye.